Morning, everyone. Actually, this is one of the ways you know you're old is when you got to switch glasses to give a presentation. Good morning. It's good to be here. My name is Dan Van Wagenen. I am currently an information security professional and manager with the New York Army National Guard at the New York State Division of Military and Naval Affairs. Never actually thought I'd be doing this line of work, which is one of the reasons why this topic kind of intrigues me, and I think it's appropriate we're coming in behind Roger Williams University, because there's really not one linear way to kind of break into InfoSec. Actually, by trade, I went to college for business administration and management, and when I first began my military career, I was actually an infantryman. So right after 9/11, I enlisted in the New York Army National Guard. I'm a career guardsman. I've served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And after I got blown up in Afghanistan, my body was a little on the beat-up side. The Army gave me two choices. They said you could be a paper pusher or you can be this computer guy. And it didn't take me long to figure out, well, I don't want to do paperwork. I guess I'll do computers. And that's kind of what started this journey into what we call cyber, which, leave it to the federal government to take a 1970s science fiction prefix and make it a domain of warfare. But cyber, which encompasses information security, electronic warfare, information operations, and a few other things, that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. And it's not necessarily a technical talk. It is on the education track. How to build a career using the reserve component military as a springboard. So for those of you who do the spot the Fed usual con thing, we're right here. It's not that hard. But we're National Guard, so we're only kind of Fed. We're a kinder, gentler type. So I'm local, Saratoga Springs. Been here actually, with the exception of the wars, my entire life. So the Albany area is near and dear to me, and I hope you're enjoying your time here. So what is the reserve component military service? There are 7 branches. Every active component has a reserve component, which acts as a manpower pool in times of emergency to beef up their ranks. So if you're a soldier in the Army Reserve, the U.S. Army proper is going to war somewhere and they need your specialty, they will pull you out as an individual. The Guard, which is predominantly what I'm going to talk about, is a territorial force. Believe it or not, our commander-in-chief is not necessarily the president of the United States. We answer to the governor of the state of New York, or any governor, depending on what state you're in. And we're only answerable to the president when we're mobilized for federal service. Simply put, we live and work in your communities. We're your neighbors, we're your friends. We mostly wear the uniform 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. Obviously, since 9/11, that has not always been the case. If you were to join one of the reserve component branches, I can almost guarantee at some point you will be mobilized for a mission, whether that mission is in Syria or Iraq, Afghanistan. Maybe not. I've known people that were mobilized and augmented U.S. forces in Korea. I've known some very lucky people that have been mobilized and gone to Hawaii for a year on an all-expenses-paid trip by the government, or Bahrain, or Germany. So it's kind of like that Family Guy joke where your experience may vary. I'm glad people watched that show and knew what I was talking about. So I'm going to mostly deep dive into the Army and Air National Guard. That's who I represent. Those are the people I work with, and those are the people I hire. And I know we have probably a couple other cyber military professionals in the room. This is, again, a brief overview. I'm not going to deep dive and bore you to tears. When I was first invited to do this, it was kind of a last-minute affair. I guess I had a speaker cancel. Tyler came to me, which I'm very honored, and said, is this something you guys could do? And I said, absolutely. So I went to some of our people within the New York Army National Guard and said, hey, do you have any materials I can use to give a talk? And it was like a 170-slide PowerPoint presentation. I kind of broke it down, a little tongue-in-cheek humor. Trust me, you're going to get more out of this than you would death by PowerPoint. So what is the National Guard force? Like I said, we're a territorial force. We're under the command of the governor. We are both Army and Air. Those are our traditional backgrounds. The Guard itself is the successor to the old militia. the Minuteman who picked up his musket and would assemble in times of emergency. We are the modern day Minutemen and women. We are the only part of the armed forces that can operate at the state level. That's important. From where I sit and where I work, we interface very closely with the New York State Emergency Management Office. We work with the Department of Homeland Security. We can do a lot of things that our active component brothers and sisters cannot legally do, and they don't do. Opens a lot of doors for us, a lot of career opportunities. In fact, a lot of members of the Guard Cyber Force are state and federal public employees. One career complements the other. And I'm going to kind of deep dive a little more into that later on. And we can be federally mobilized to augment active component missions. In the cyber realm, that could be anywhere between working with an actual line unit, i.e. combat unit, going overseas, to supporting other government agencies. It's very dynamic and very fluid, and because this is the bleeding edge of a new epoch in warfare, we're kind of not flying by the seat of our pants, but it's very fluid. We actually used to joke in the infantry that the only time people moved quickly is when they were getting shot at. Outside of that, the government, as we've all probably experienced in some way, shape, or form, moves very, very slowly. So, general information about the Guard. If you were to use the Guard as a vehicle to jumpstarting an information security career, there's just some givens, i.e. you will go to basic combat training. There's no getting around it. You have to have that first step, capstone training to... The Army likes to use the word indoctrinate into the culture. I prefer immerse. It's not as bad as you might think. Forget what you saw with Full Metal Jacket, or hell, even Stripes for that matter. With Bill Murray, if you're old enough to remember that movie. I see a few people nodding their heads. Thank you. I don't feel quite as old. It's not bad. It's just a stepping stone. And everyone has to go through it. I've been in 16 years now. I vaguely even remember it. But following your basic initial training, you're going to go to some sort of occupational training. Now, this is where things get a little interesting. This is where it's based on the individual. When it comes to the cyber domain, anything that is information dominance, that could take you to Fort Gordon, Georgia. That could take you to Pensacola, Florida. You're probably going to be there 6 months to a year, depending on how they're building the training now. And it is constantly changing. That's actually one of the unique challenges of this domain. I've heard it's actually really good. You have subject matter experts, say people from SANS, giving the course of instruction. You're banging out certification exams. You're coming out with a bunch of letters after your name. And by some accounts, you're also on the golf course somewhere between 3 and 3:30 in the afternoon. If you're into that sort of thing, maybe that's an additional perk. My swing sucks, so I probably wouldn't be doing that. So this is about as ugly as it gets when it comes to the military culture. You may go to additional skills schools. The Army is getting very good at using SANS models, ISC square models for training. So everything you're doing is going to be industry set. There's nothing really crazy, except maybe some of the satellite stuff where you're learning it strictly the military way. Everything is based off a NIST or some sort of previously existing standard. And finally, everybody in the Guard does a 6-year service commitment. And I know that probably sounds like a lot to people, but your initial contract, if it's 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year normally, it's going to go by surprisingly fast. I know at the end of my first enlistment, outside of the Iraq deployment, it seemed like I had just enlisted. I was actually shocked that I was getting those emails and the phone calls from career counselors and recruiters like the lovely Amy Vernon, who's joined me, sitting down here in front. But it's a really good thing. It's a really good way to build a skill set, get paid to do it, and you're always going to have that core group of friends and colleagues in the military community to kind of be a resource, especially if you stay in public service InfoSec, i.e. working for a state or federal agency. So some of the benefits of Guard service, and Sergeant Vernon, I'm sure will jump in if I miss anything, but there's enlistment and re-enlistment bonuses available to people who want to come in. These are usually cash bonuses. I want to say right now they hover somewhere around the $10,000 to $20,000 range. I know they're looking to change that with the new administration cyber has become an all-encompassing priority for the federal government. And last I was aware, they are talking about benefits as high as $90,000 sign-on bonuses, $20,000 one-year extensions. Now, that hasn't hit the guard yet, but that is what we're looking at on the horizon. There's also the GI Bill program, for those of you who may not have a college degree. One of the dirty little secrets of the federal public service career track is they prefer you have a degree. It's very hard to waver getting away from that. And case in point, I went to school, actually right over here at UAlbany, and I never paid a dime out of pocket the entire 4 years I was in college. My Uncle Sam paid for everything, which was great. I graduated college. Actually got paid to go to college on the GI Bill. At the time, I was making about $600 a month. That was a little over 10 years ago. I know it's significantly higher now with the post 9/11 Chapter 33 GI Bill. But you leave with no student debt, which is a major issue for young people, especially today. And you actually have money to live on. You're not eating ramen noodle and bologna sandwiches every night just to survive. There's also the student loan repayment program, which I think goes as high as $50,000 a year. You enlist. The military will pay off your student loans up to that amount. Other nice little perks of guard service. And mind you, you're getting all this as a 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year individual. Low-cost life insurance. I think it's $29 a month for the Soldiers Group life insurance. Right off the bat, you're getting $400,000. And actually, in New York, there are certain programs where you can get that expense reimbursed. So you're getting life insurance, and you're not technically paying for it. Very nice if you have a family. There is a pension. Yes, a pension. We get very excited about that nowadays because most private industry companies no longer do that. And it's getting increasingly harder to even find public sector jobs that have a pension. On top of that, we have the thrift savings program, which is kind of like the federal government's version of a 401k. There is a matching. I don't actually participate in it, so I can't deep dive. If anyone has any questions, Sergeant Vernon could probably answer those after the fact. And low-cost health care. As a drilling member of the U.S. military, even as a reservist, you are eligible for TRICARE Reserve Select, which actually isn't too bad. I use it myself. It's a good thing, again, especially if you have a family. Other benefits of guard service. You have a guaranteed job. We are the only branch of the armed services that it's in your contract when you enlist as a rule that you know what your job's going to be. Other branches, not so much. You might show up to your basic training and find out you're being put in another job that you didn't want. We don't have that problem. And that's the good thing about being a territorial force. You also have guaranteed duty location. So, do we have people from the southern tier here? Lower Hudson Valley? One. What about Adirondacks? One. Western New York? Okay, nobody from Western New York, but the point is, we got 63 locations in the Guard across New York. Chances are there's a duty station somewhere near where you live or work that you can drill out of. We also have formal industry standard set training. If you go to Fort Gordon as a cyber network defender, you will be on the fast track for the best SANS, CompTIA, insert certification body here training. And that correlates into certifications, which makes you more marketable on the outside. On the job training, there's only so much you can learn reading an exam cram guide or even doing a boot camp. When you're actually, in the dirt or in the cyber world behind a desk, messing with routers and switches or whatnot, that's experience you can't get any other way. And really, one of the biggest takeaways for me with my military service was leadership and management acumen. When I was a child, I actually wanted to grow up and be a lawyer. Please don't judge me. If you had told me I would be an information security professional and I would even be talking at a con, I would have immediately discounted it. But, serving in the military and having that leadership and management background put me where I am today. I am a program manager for the federal government, and it's actually a very nice position to be in. And the military is what set me up for that, because they took a 17-year-old punk kid from Saratoga and made something out of them. Even the worst day in the Army, I'm still grateful that I had that experience to get where I'm at. And those doors are open to everyone here as well. So now that we got all the other stuff out of the way, we can get into the really exciting material. The Guard Cyber Force, or InfoSec, cyber, depending on what your background is and perspective. First, in broad and vague generalities, what is Guard Cyber and what do we do? And it's kind of hard for me to kind of deep dive into it, because a lot of it is behind the secret and top secret curtains, which I'm not allowed to pull back up here. But basically, we protect. Our job is to defend. In some cases, we even survey. And that's not a mission that you're going to find in a lot of private sector companies. You're not even going to find that in a lot of other federal agencies at the state or local level. Cyber is the new domain. 100 years ago, we only had the three main domains: land, air, sea. And in the last half century, we've seen space. And in the last, I think it was 2009, when the Department of Defense codified what is cyber. So now we're waging war in the intangible. That phone in your pocket could be just as lethal, or I would argue more lethal, than the bullet in a 30-round magazine that the infantry guy is carrying into combat. Because that rifle, you could kill somebody with one shot, true. But if you use that phone and you take down, the electrical system for a hospital, you just wiped out a lot of people. Think about that for a minute. It's a growing mission, and by growing I mean there's more jobs coming, more organizations, what we call force structure in the military, more units, and doing what the government does best. They're throwing lots of money at it. That money, at least, is being used appropriately, especially when it comes to training. You figure a run-of-the-mill SANS course is going to set your organization back at least $10,000, not to mention the fact you won't be at work for a week. Employers may be reluctant to send people. When it comes to the military, not so much, because they know they're going to get something out of it. It's also a unique culture. And I say this coming from a line unit. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only combat armed soldier in my organization. When you're out in the dirt doing what we call HUA, high-speed stuff, it's very different. Very, I hate to use the term, but testosterone-driven. In the cyber culture, it's a little different. At the risk of maybe getting into trouble, we do tend to go by first names. A cyber warrior tends to look kind of like this. It's you're not Steve Rogers, you're more Elliot Alderson, or you're rocking the dad bod. From where I sit, and don't get me wrong, there are certain standards of fitness you have to maintain. But you know what? The guy who may suck at running or doing push-ups, I really don't care about that. Can he use that 6 inches between his ears? If I sit him down in front of a router and switch ensemble connected to a computer and I tell him to do something, can he do it? That's what we care about. And I'm not saying you're going to find that uniform across the military, but that is unique to the Guard. And I actually think it's a positive thing. We want people that are competent. We want people that know their trade. Because when the day comes, and it probably will, you want the best and brightest sitting in that chair. You don't want a guy who could speak, walk the walk and talk the talk, but doesn't even know what Kali Linux is. That's a very bad scenario. And there's opportunities galore. Not just with a .mil email address, but like I said with the Guard early on, we interface with state and federal agencies. We are the only aspect of the military that legally can. So when you're doing a joint operation with the CIA or Department of Homeland Security or the New York State Emergency Management Office, that is a unique perspective that is open to us. And depending on your background, and if you wanted to go down this track, it's a great way to start a career. And let's face it, if you're not working full-time for us in the Guard, and we do have full-time opportunities, you might be working for one of these agencies. It's a very complementary career track. So benefits of the Guard, being in the Guard Cyber Force. Paid certification and training and test vouchers. I know I touched on this a little bit. I don't generally put it on a slide deck or even my signature block, but, I do have CISSP, GCIH, CCNA, insert combination of letters here. Every one of those courses I went to, I never paid a dime. In fact, I got paid to go to those courses. Hotel expenses, training, or food expenses. I have never paid for a certification voucher. Everything that comes after my name, I never paid for, except for the fact that I wear a uniform, 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year. It really is a fast track to building that resume to show, hey, I'm credentialed by these bodies to do these things. I never would have gotten that, probably on the outside. Train with industry opportunities. Lately, because of all the hacks, Target, etc., we've had an unprecedented opportunity in the military world to work with private industry. They want to know what we know, because we're going to see things that they may not see, and vice versa. And there is that, a lot of times you'll hear public-private partnerships. We're kind of doing that in a de facto manner. We're already having those conversations, those dialogues. I mean, this event here is great. You have a wide range of private industry. You have trade groups. You have educational institutions. And we've got to interface with them over the last 2 days. That's great, because you're exchanging ideas. You're building a network where, I may not know how to do something, but I know a guy who does. And on the military side, we're building a team of those guys we know who are doing really great things. Security clearances. If you have a top secret, you can almost guarantee you're going to walk into a near six-figure job right off the bat. And I say that because the resources that go in to an investigation on an individual to get that designation are tremendous. I was actually shocked. In a previous assignment, I was a security manager, and you start looking at what they actually do to really deep dive into someone's past to say, is this person trustworthy to run a secret network system? It's intense. And if you get that with a polygraph, you can pretty much bet you're going to get a six-figure job. It's a very nice thing. Pretty much joining in the military in any technological field, you're almost guaranteed a secret, which is nice, but it can progress to top secret with sensitive compartmental information, TSSCI, if I'm saying that right. And depending on where you go in your career, you could be in that elite. I think it's privileged at the top of the food chain. A lot of opportunity there. And everything you're going to do as a guardsman or any sort of reserve component military is going to complement your civilian career. Before I left my last private sector employer, which was a financial institution, they loved it when I went for my 2 weeks AT somewhere, my annual training, that 2 weeks a year I'm required to do as a drilling reservist, because they knew I was going to get some really good training and probably a certification that they didn't have to pay for. And then I would come back to work. And over the years doing that, that's how I first broached into management. It's, oh, hey, you're an incident handler, you're digital forensics. We want you to do this. We want you to spearhead this endeavor, because suddenly you have a COO telling his CEO that, hey, we got a guy who's qualified to do this. And we didn't have to pay for it. So there's opportunities there. There's opportunities with mission sets, especially when it comes to networking. Without getting too deep into it, you deal with like Title 18 forces, which are your federal government areas. You have Title, 50 intelligence. You get to interface with all these different communities. And it's a great way to get your foot in the door if that's the career route you want to go. And I can't stress that enough. I mean, anyone who's been in this field for more than a day knows it's all about your network. This exponentially grows your network almost overnight. So it doesn't matter if you're a young man or woman getting ready to go to college, or maybe you're even still in high school. I mean, it's never too early to start planning ahead and just take opportunities as they come. Like I said, I never thought I'd be here doing this. I mean, this is great. And thank you for coming to this. And lastly, to paraphrase our current Secretary of Offense, James Mattis, we get to do the stuff you'd otherwise go to jail for. Again, without going too deep into it, a lot of what we do is classified in nature. And it's the stuff that movies are made of. If you want to be a part of something that you can't talk about for 40, 50, 60 years before you write a book about it, This is one of those tracks to go through. And yeah, I actually don't know if this is even true. It could be like fake news stuff, but it was on the internet, so it must be true. I just like the quote. And we're obviously really big fans in of the armed forces of General Mattis, who I actually had the opportunity to serve under during the Fallujah operation. So much respect to him. So Guard cyber capabilities. What is it the Guard cyber force actually does? And unfortunately, there's nobody here probably with a clearance high enough where I could talk about that, and we're certainly not in a secured environment. But what I can say, and I know we discussed at length kind of how do we put this without violating any operational security, we secure and protect. Cyber is the information dominance arena. If it goes through a wire or over the air in a signal, we have some level of involvement. And it's really the future of warfare. I mean, if you look at like the Russian campaigns into South Ossetia and Georgia or the Ukraine, what was the first thing they did before they sent the tanks and infantry across the border? They launched a major cyber attack, mostly in the form of one of the largest distributed denial of service attacks the world's ever seen. They shut down the communications for all the government agencies, the military. They actually severely impacted the infrastructure. They were shutting down power stations. And while the Ukrainians and the Georgians were kind of doing a WTF moment, is when they started rolling across the border. And in modern warfare, if you can't communicate, you're back to bayonets and barbed wire, like 100 years ago in the First World War. And just to kind of follow up that analogy a little bit, 100 years ago, the United States had just entered World War I. The generals had these things called aeroplanes and tanks, and they were still trying to figure out how to use them when the war ended. It took some very enterprising younger officers, some of whom you've probably heard of, notably Colonels Billy Mitchell and George Patton, who went on to much bigger and better things to figure out, hey, there's potential here. The problem with the cyber domain overall is we don't have that time, that 20-year period in between world wars to test things and see if they work. Technology moves pretty much at the speed of light. And if you really want to be a part of something bigger and better than yourself, this is one of those ways to do it. To leave a mark long beyond probably your lifespan, because we are in the primordial stages of what the keynote gentleman spoke about yesterday about this digital Pearl Harbor. It's not a 1-day, 2-hour attack. The battle's already started, but it's still ongoing, and it's not too late to get involved. So, any questions of me? That's all I got. And knowing is half the battle. Again, for the children of the 80s that laugh, and the younger guys over here, it took a second. They had to Google it.
I've got a question about the secret top secret clearance. Does that ever kind of curtail your ability to talk to, I'll say, other elements of our community?
Short answer, yes and no. What it does is it gives us certain restrictions, because we do get to do secret squirrel stuff. But there are some concepts you can kind of have a dialogue with someone, and we want to have outreach to communities like this. I think it's very important from where I sit, and again, I'm just one program manager, to have dialogue with private sector, other public sector elements, trade associations, these types of gatherings, the cons. And there's things I learn here that I would never learn anywhere else. And we can't really reciprocate with specifics, but sometimes we can even concur or non-concur with maybe a trend, that sort of thing. It really is kind of a restraint, but unfortunately due to the nature of the work, it's something we have to abide by. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
To say people who have run on the wrong side of highway.
Okay.
That's how I get in trouble. And I found that affects sometimes when I talk to people in .gov, they're like, you seem to know a lot of stuff. I'm like, well, yes, that's my job. If I was wondering if that, well, it's not for me, but for other people who are sort of both 1 foot on each side, is that, would that get you in trouble?
It could. There's a certain level of ambiguity, and we are very cautious. And that's why in dot mil circles you hear a lot about our private-public partnership. Mm-hmm. You know, having some sort of vehicle for that type of exchange maybe is on the horizon, but I don't know how we're going to get there. At least, this is just Dan Van Wagenen speaking. I don't know how we can kind of do that. But yes, I certainly don't want to run afoul of the wrong side of 18 or 10 or 32. So I don't want to be one of those people you're having to defend someday.
Thanks for getting up there on the Saratoga native as well.
Oh, yeah. Blue streaks.
Yeah, just looking at the picture here, did you make that?
I did tweak it a little bit, yes.
You did?
Yeah, I'm a child of the 80s. I do apologize in advance if some of the references went over anyone's head, but...
I just wanted to make sure I was clear going forward that you contributed to the battle.
Not that one, but I've been in a few. I tell you what, as you get older, the worst thing that you can do is flip through like American Heroes Channel, and you see yourself in a documentary about an early battle in the Iraq War. That's really when you know that you're old. Or Bosnia. Any other questions? Oh, thank you all. I'm going to stick around. Oh, thank you. I mean, by all means, I'm going to stick around, so if you have any questions for me or the lovely Amy Vernon on the actual recruitment process, feel free to come up.